tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
Here we have evidence that our own province is involved in enriching organized crime through publicly funded drug trafficking.
Leaked documents show the BC government and law enforcement know that prescription opioids are being trafficked in Canada and the world. The health minister says the leak may compromise an investigation. Plus, overnight warmth, cold mornings.
It leaves us with 3 hours of not knowing what to do.
People without homes ask for more places to warm up during the day as winter weather grips BC. And
we don't know if they're cracks of substance.
Seawall shut down. A stretch of the waterfront walk near Science World is closed for safety reasons.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. Leaked Ministry of Health documents released by the opposition BC Conservatives show that government and law enforcement officials are aware that prescription opioids are being trafficked nationally and internationally. As Katie DeRosa explains, the government says that leak could hamper an investigation.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's promise to appoint a so-called fentanyl czar was key to securing a temporary reprieve from U.S. tariffs. But now the Conservatives are accusing the NDP government of facilitating the national and international trafficking of the prescription opioids the province offers drug users for free.
Here we have evidence that our own province is involved in enriching organized crime through publicly funded drug trafficking.
Leaked Ministry of Health slides released by the BC Conservatives show that a significant portion of the opioids and fentanyl patches handed out by doctors and pharmacists are not going to those who need them, and instead are being trafficked provincially, nationally, and internationally. The slides also allege that at least 60 pharmacies are offering incentives to doctors and housing providers to entice clients to get their safe supply drugs from them. Health Minister Josie Osborne confirms the slides were shared with law enforcement agencies as part of the government's Special Investigations Unit. It's made up of former RCMP officers looking at ways to stop the diversion of prescription opioids.
I want to be really clear. There is no tolerance for this kind of action.
Eleanor Sturko, a former Mountie herself, says the revelations are especially troubling in light of Donald Trump's demands that Canada curb the flow of fentanyl into the U.S. His executive order on tariffs singled out BC and its role in the heightened domestic production of fentanyl. He did not mention the trafficking of prescription opioids. Osborne is slamming the Conservatives for leaking the information and drawing what she calls a false link to Trump's tariff threats.
He's been very clear about the reasons for his tariffs. He wants to annex Canada as the 51st state, and he'll say anything he can to get us there.
Sturko first raised concerns in 2023 that BC's prescription opioids are being diverted from those who need it and instead used as a currency by organized crime groups. Harm reduction advocates say regulated opioids are a safer alternative to deadly street drugs. Still, Sturko is pressing for a public inquiry. Katie DeRosa, CBC News, Victoria.
As Canada moves to beef up border security during this pause on tariffs, there are calls to crack down harder on fentanyl and bring in tougher penalties. As Mira Baines reports, only a small percentage of shipping containers are actually checked.
A new $1.3 billion plan to secure the Canada-U.S. border includes outfitting the RCMP with helicopters, drones, and mobile surveillance towers, and creating a new joint strike force to go after organized crime. The union representing workers with the Canada Border Services Agency says the agency can do more to check cargo containers.
Right now, our capacity is inspecting 1% or less of what is coming in, which is quite low.
Ottawa is promising artificial intelligence and imaging tools.
We estimate we're short between 2,000 and 3,000 officers at the CBSA specifically. And then when you look at what's coming in between ports of entry, which is also a problem, right now that's not something that we're doing at all. We've kind of just left it to the RCMP to do, and now we see provinces chipping in.
Fentanyl is considered 50 times stronger than heroin and has resulted in thousands of overdose deaths. The leader of the federal Conservatives is promising to get tough on high-level fentanyl dealers. He pointed to a massive, sophisticated drug lab near the tiny BC community of Falkland. Polyev says fentanyl production must be treated like mass murder, and efforts should target super labs.
40 milligrams is enough to kill 20 people. Anyone who is involved in trafficking that amount of fentanyl will get a life sentence. We will lock them up and we will throw away the key.
Life sentences in those types of cases are currently at the discretion of judges.
Our country has been known to be an enabler of these threat networks, including the cartels, including the triads, including certain Middle Eastern networks.
The key to tackling the issues, according to this strategic security advisor, is changing legal framework to better tackle money laundering of drug profits.
If at the end of the day we can't deliver on prosecution and conviction, there's no consequences.
Still, it's unclear if efforts to boost security measures at the border will be enough to deter tariffs from being imposed by the U.S. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
Mounties in Agassiz say 2 men have died after falling through ice on a small lake. It happened on Grace Lake, just outside Harrison Hot Springs on Tuesday. The RCMP says they were told 2 men who'd gone ice fishing on the lake during the day had not returned home. A family member went to the water and spotted a large hole in the ice along with fishing gear. Officers and local search and rescue crews eventually found 2 bodies under the ice. Police are urging people to be very careful around ice. Cities across Metro Vancouver have opened warming centres overnight to people without homes as winter weather grips our province. But one advocate says they ought to be open 24 hours a day to protect against daytime cold. More now from the CBC's Saurabh Sandhu.
Grace Lenoir and her friend huddle under a small tarp on a sidewalk in Vancouver's downtown east side. They use their belongings to try to block the cold.
I don't wish it upon anybody, but it's hard just to know that, you know, you're given something, you know, a place to sleep that's warm, and then there to fend for yourself.
After spending the night at a warming center, Lenoir is back on the street. She says everyone had to leave by 7 a.m.
You know, we just kind of wait until other places that are open during the day, which is at 9 a.m. So that leaves us like with 3 hours of not knowing what to do.
The city of Vancouver says it opens warming centers overnight when temperatures drop below -4 degrees Celsius or it feels like -4. But advocates like Amanda Burrows say daytime temperatures are too frigid for some.
Why do we then still not have anywhere for people to go during the day when it is still cold and people are wandering around with their belongings?
The city says some warming centers are in spaces run by other groups that use them during the day. It says people can go to public libraries and community centers. Upkar Tatle has been running this emergency daytime shelter in White Rock since 2021. He says their services make it a success.
It's not something that's brick and mortar in the traditional sense. It's not something that will occupy a huge space for a long period of time. It is just that it's there for the period of emergency to provide relief for those individuals who need it the most.
Tatle says he hopes to partner with other communities struggling to provide support to vulnerable people.
We'll port in local health services, so nurses, doctors, pharmacies, social workers. We'll also have employment counselors.
Tatle says he's confident his daytime shelter model can be replicated in other cities to try to bring more people in from the cold. Saurabh Sandhu, CBC News, Vancouver.
Stephanie Hungerford is here with our look at the weather, and it is just downright cold across the province.
It is cold, Dan, and it's not going to get much warmer, to be honest. It's going to continue to be this cold. In fact, there's this kind of unstable weather mass that we've been seeing, and it's been hard to predict whether we're having snow or what's happening. And what we will see in parts of Metro Vancouver, so for the east part of Metro Vancouver and into Abbotsford, we will see about 2 to 5 centimeters of snow tonight. This is also going to be the case for Victoria and Nanaimo. So that should be through tonight and then maybe into tomorrow morning. But, you know, Vancouver, Metro Vancouver here, Downtown, we might be...
boat to cross the water. BC Ferries has cancelled sailings after the ramp at Snug Cove was damaged because of challenging weather. It follows an unrelated incident on Sunday when a ferry hit 3 docked boats. The mayor says it's a challenge for islanders.
We just want to ensure that BC Ferries is safe in their operations and that they're communicating with our residents, they're communicating with our local government as these challenges move forward.
Ferry says repairs to the ramp are underway, but sailings will be cancelled until at least Thursday. Bowen Island residents can register for a free parking pass while the Snug Cove dock is out of service. And with daytime temperatures in Kamloops hovering around -10, people are doing their cardio inside the local hockey rink.
This week, this is the first time we've done it this year because it's so cold to be outside. We challenge ourselves a bit by doing stairs, up and down stairs, and we go down through the seats sometimes. But yeah, so there's some variety, and we just changed directions, so we're going in the other direction.
We've been walking for how many years now? 10 years or more?
Oh no.
And normally we
20
walk.
years.
Yeah, we walk outside, but when it gets cold like this, and we used to walk in the arena here quite often in the winter when the snow is flying and stuff like that. And it is an amazing place to walk.
Monday, Wednesday, and Friday is our walking days, so it's perfect. And it's just a wonderful thing to be able to do this inside and not have to stop walking at all. I wear a Fitbit, she does too.
We're just walking. We're meeting friends and catching up and having a nice walk. We try and come most days that it's open if it's really cold, otherwise we walk outside. It's just nice to have a place where you can go where you don't have to worry about falling down. It's not icy, it's not cold. We have hockey tickets, so we're familiar with the arena too. And you see a different side of the players a little bit.
Learning new plays.
When the Blazers are playing, when they're here, we usually see they're doing different drills, doing different skills, strength training, that kind of thing. So it's really interesting to watch that side of the game to see how they actually prepare.
To another walk, part of Vancouver's popular Seawall has been closed. As Jessica Chung shows us, workers found cracks near Science World, and it's not clear when it will reopen.
This whole area has been fenced off, starting from here at Science World, stretching all along the Seawall to the Creekside Community Center. That's all going to be shut down until further notice, and that is due to the aging expo deck structure that supports this part of the Seawall. Now, the City of Vancouver says an inspection showed that there were a number of cracks on the underside of the structure, and out of an abundance of caution, they decided to shut it down.
We don't know if they're cracks of substance where moisture might have gotten in, and the cables, because these are pre-tensioned concrete panels, if they've corroded or not. So this is the complete unknown, and this is where further investigation and testing will determine if there's anything to be truly concerned about.
This very busy and popular portion of the Seawall is closed to pedestrians and cyclists. People will have to detour from Creekside Community Center via Ontario, Switchman, and Quebec streets to then reconnect with the Seawall north of Science World.
Well, I guess that's good that it's closed because you don't want the structure to fall apart.
Major inconvenience for an awful lot of people, for sure.
So I think that's more important than us being cut off from our walk, because it's old, and there probably are a lot of things that are happening underneath there that need to be taken care of. So I think safety first.
I'm really, really happy that they did that, because I'd rather not end up in the drink.
Best not to be on it and walk around.
Safety is important for sure. I just hope it doesn't take 10 years to get fixed.
The segment of this deck was built back in the 80s for the 1986 World Expo. It was supposed to be temporary, but now it's the last portion that's left. Now, more than 4 decades later, the city says it's inevitable that the deck structure starts showing its age.
Built as temporary structures, it's remarkable that they've lasted 40 years. They're well past what their probably initial construction, expected of them. In many respects, we're lucky that they've lasted this long.
Right now, an assessment is taking place on how bad the damage is and what repairs need to be done. Now, the city says there's no indication about how much this is going to cost, and that's really going to come down to what exactly needs to be repaired. There's also no timeline as to when this is all going to happen or how long this portion of the seawall is going to be closed for. But the city does say that it is looking to improve the detour paths in the coming weeks. Jessica Chung, CBC News, Vancouver.
BC's premier claims we will be the least harmed province if a trade war with the U.S. breaks out. We'll dig into the numbers and the claim after the break. As concerns over U.S. tariffs mount, Premier David Eby says BC would be the least exposed province in a trade war with the United States. Trade between this province and overseas markets has grown over the years, but as John Hernandez explains, the U.S. is still a critical partner for our economy.
The United States is BC's biggest trading partner by far. Tens of billions of dollars worth of goods flow in both directions of the border each year. So could BC withstand a prolonged trade war with the United States? Economists say some industries would be hit pretty hard, but unlike other provinces, BC does have a unique advantage: its geography. In 2023, BC exported just over $30 billion of goods to the U.S. That's more than half of the province's total exports. That included more than $8 billion worth of energy products like natural gas and electricity, over $7 billion in forestry products like lumber, $3.5 billion in consumer goods, $3.2 billion in metals and minerals, and $2 billion in farm, fishing, and food products. So how vulnerable is BC to U.S. tariffs compared to other provinces? The Premier thinks BC is in relatively good shape.
It's important for people at home to know that BC is the least trade-exposed province to the United States. Unlike Ontario or Manitoba or Quebec, we do have access to those global markets.
EB's claim is supported by the numbers. BC's share of exports to the U.S. is lower than most other provinces and well below the Canadian average.
It is on the Pacific coast and therefore has the Asian market that you can reach more easily than those provinces. That's different from Ontario that is shipping over 70%, if not over 80% to the United States.
And BC's trade relationships are changing. The most recent data from 2024 shows that BC's share of exports to the U.S. is declining, while exports to countries like South Korea and China are increasing. But can those countries become the saving grace in a prolonged trade war?
Well, that will take a long while. 50+% is a huge market, and so it is almost as important as for Ontario. So we should not fool ourselves.
When it comes to imports, the U.S. is also BC's biggest trading partner, with billions of dollars worth of consumer goods and refined oil coming into the province each year. A century-old relationship between two neighbors with a lot on the line for both sides. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
Now, the looming possibility of a trade war with the U.S. has many people worried about their own finances. The CBC's Malika Karim asks a personal finance expert how Canadians can soften the blow to their wallets.
We try to encourage people not to, do anything too quick.
At a time of financial uncertainty, one expert says to keep calm and look at what you can control during the pause on tariffs.
Are there aspects of your budget that you could potentially trim back or cut out? Because in the event that we do have the tariffs implemented, there will be harm caused to most Canadians' balance sheets. Like the impact will not be good. The costs are going to go up at the grocery store, for gas. We might even see some impact in the housing market, and just about everything's going to cost more. So this is very much about seeing what you could do to change your budget to create opportunity to maybe save a bit more.
So what about if you're thinking of retiring soon? Should you, or is it better to wait a bit longer?
I think this is very much about retirement preparedness. Do you feel like you have the ability, if you go into retirement, to absorb some higher costs? If you don't feel like you have that, then the answer might be that you are working a little bit longer.
As for investments, Scorgie's advice is the same. Stay the course. But if you're feeling uneasy, she says to check in with an advisor and reevaluate your risk tolerance. Malika Karim, CBC News, Calgary.
Here's a look at the day that was on Vancouver's North Shore, the snowy treetops. Now, cloud lingered over most of the Lower Mainland for much of the day, and temperatures lingered around -1. Stephanie Hungerford will have your BC-wide weather forecast coming up. The new spiritual leader for the world's Ismaili Muslims has now been chosen a day after the death of the Aga Khan. Prince Rahim Al Husseini has been named as the next Aga Khan, the 50th hereditary imam of the 15 million Shia Ismaili Muslims on earth. This comes after his father, Prince Karim Al Husseini, died in Lisbon yesterday at the age of 88. The late Aga Khan's burial will be held in the coming days, followed by an homage ceremony. Donald Trump and Elon Musk are facing backlash as they rapidly reshape the U.S. government, dismantling agencies, cutting programs, and purging nonpartisan employees. Katie Simpson now with their crusade on government spending.
The demonstrations popped up all over the U.S., hundreds of people gathering in different cities to speak out against Elon Musk and his unprecedented overhaul of the federal government.
We need to end this illegal power grab. Vote, vote, vote.
Donald Trump picked the world's richest man to lead the newly created Department of Government Efficiency, known as DOGE, with Musk ordered to recommend government cuts. The Trump administration has so far offered millions of federal workers buyouts, warning their jobs may be cut, fired several inspectors general who act as government watchdogs, fired prosecutors involved in the January 6th cases, warned FBI agents who investigated the Capitol riot they too could be fired.
They have set their sights on a full purge of anyone in government that doesn't bend the knee and follow their orders.
The agency USAID is in the process of being shut down. The Departments of Labor and Education could be next. And Musk's team has access to the most sensitive information at the Treasury Department. Overview of the $6 trillion it spends every year.
Presumably, they want this access for something. They plan to use the data in some way, either to reject payments or to use it for some other punitive purpose.
Lawsuits have been launched to try to stop Musk's work, while Democrats have tried to force Musk and his team to testify in front of lawmakers.
That's not a point of order.
A plan that ultimately failed with the support of Trump's allies.
I think there's a gross overreaction in the media to what is happening. The executive branch of government in our system has the right to evaluate how executive branch agencies are operating.
The White House says Musk and Trump campaigned together, and this is making good on their promise to curb government spending. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
Donald Trump's radical proposal for the future of Gaza is being condemned by many around the world. The president suggested the United States could, quote, take over the Palestinian territory and relocate hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. As Chris Reyes explains, he even offered to help rebuild it into a kind of Riviera.
The fallout from President Donald Trump's comments on the future of the Gaza Strip has rippled across the globe, triggering anger and confusion, especially among Palestinians.
We have tried refuge before, we have tried displacement before, and it will not happen again. We have said it over and over, the Palestinian leadership, our president. People have made it very clear that we will not leave our land.
In Gaza, Trump's proposal to take over the Strip and relocate Palestinians in neighboring countries is being taken very seriously, but also met with resistance.
I do believe that Trump was the most courageous U.S. president who has previously taken bold decisions regarding the Middle East.
This is our country and we can't leave it in all circumstances.
At the White House briefing, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt was asked repeatedly to clarify what Trump meant when he said the U.S. would clear the land and take ownership of Gaza.
It's been made very clear to the president that the United States needs to be involved in this rebuilding effort to ensure stability in the region for all people. But that does not mean boots on the ground in Gaza. It does not mean American taxpayers will be funding this effort. It means Donald Trump, who is the best deal maker on the planet, is going to strike a deal with our partners in the region.
So far, those partners have publicly rejected Trump's plan, including Jordan and Egypt. Leavitt said the president is not fazed.
He has made it very clear, he's been very vocal, that he expects our partners in the region, particularly Egypt and Jordan, to accept Palestinian refugees temporarily so that we can rebuild their home.
According to the White House, President Trump has already spoken to the leaders of Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Bahrain, and will meet with the King of Jordan next week. Chris Reyes, CBC News, New York.
Now, as we saw in Chris's story, the Israeli bombardment has left much of Gaza laid waste. But for millions of Palestinians, it is still their home. As Margaret Evans shows us, Trump's proposal to clear them out of the Gaza Strip is triggering strong emotions.
One of Gaza's impromptu graveyards, the dead buried hastily when bombs were falling. For many, there is still one more journey to make, home to the places they were forced from when they lived. Shireen Talaba has come for her brother Khalil and two cousins, all killed by Israeli fire, she says, in separate incidents. We have no one but our family, she says. We refuse to return home without them. It is just one scene of many as Gazans try to piece together what's left of their lives during a fragile ceasefire. News of Donald Trump's hopes to own Gaza and empty it of Palestinians has been met with fury, disdain, and despair.
He will come now with his all the plan to evacuate not just Gaza Strip, to all Palestine.
During his first presidency, Donald Trump broke with convention by recognizing Jerusalem as the Israeli capital and moving the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, despite Palestinian hopes of a state with occupied East Jerusalem as its capital. Trump's latest proposal on Gaza is widely seen as a gift to hard-line Jewish nationalists who want to resettle Gaza themselves and annex the occupied West Bank. Now, with God's help, we work to permanently bury the dangerous idea of a Palestinian state, says Bezalel Smotrich, Israel's finance minister. Some Gazans fear that Egypt and Jordan's refusal to take in Gaza's population won't hold.
Eventually, they will agree to move the Gaza people from Gaza.
Others say nothing will uproot them.
Trump cannot do anything here because in front of him there is a great people called Palestinian people.
Every day, Gazans are still returning to the homes they had to leave behind. Some, like Shireen Talaba, to bury their dead for a second time. Margaret Evans, CBC News, London.
Tackling illegal fentanyl moving across the Canada-U.S. border is one thing, but experts say targeting how criminal groups move drugs and hide their dirty money is a bigger challenge. And as Nisha Patel reports, cracking down on money laundering has been a long-standing issue in Canada.
The fentanyl coming through Canada is massive.
The U.S. president says if Canada doesn't crack down on drugs at the border, he'll invoke tariffs, crippling the economy. So the Prime Minister has promised to act, including cracking down on money laundering. According to a Canadian Police Intelligence Service, as much as $113 billion was laundered through Canada last year, much of it by the nearly 100 organized crime groups that produced fentanyl in this country.
Legislation has simply not kept up with the way this space has evolved over the last 25 years. It's just not been a priority for the government.
Experts say criminals are drawn to financial rules that are more lax compared to the U.S. There's less oversight, so they can more easily hide dirty money.
Even if you get caught, the penalties are relatively minor.
Even before Trump's threat, Ottawa proposed larger financial penalties for companies that don't follow anti-money laundering laws. This after TD Bank was fined $3 billion by American authorities for failing to stop fentanyl traffickers from laundering millions of dollars through its U.S. branches.
Banks, other financial institutions, securities dealers, jewelers, gold dealers, casinos. It's a huge problem in the sense of it's so pervasive and there are so many ways to do it.
Michael Ecclestone helps businesses monitor suspicious financial activity. He says there are big gaps in how Canada deals with money laundering compared to the U.S.
A lack of resources and a lack of focus is the amount of prosecution.
Canada has pledged to launch a joint strike force with the U.S. to combat money laundering. The federal government has also promised to create a financial crimes agency to boost enforcement, but that's almost 3 years overdue. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
As part of the deal with the U.S. president to delay tariffs, Prime Minister Trudeau committed to designating Mexican cartels as terrorist groups. Well, the scope of their influence in Canada is still unclear. As Thomas Dagler reports, there's evidence their reach is expanding in this country.
This is what police say Mexican drug cartels are slipping into Canada. $83 million worth of cocaine, destined for every corner of the country, and recently traced to a murderous cartel making inroads here.
They were prominent. I mean, if you look at what we have here right now, this is a large load.
In a new pledge, the Prime Minister announced Ottawa will list cartels as terrorists, just one of the efforts to ward off U.S. tariffs, as the Trump administration issues this fresh warning.
The Mexican drug cartels are rapidly expanding in Canada, and that's a danger.
Cartels are known to smuggle truckloads of drugs across the U.S. border and into Canada. But a recent bust in BC suggests they're also producing enough here to send abroad. At this super lab, police say the chemicals seized would have amounted to nearly 100 million doses of fentanyl.
The fact that they are here, I will say thriving, it is dangerous for sure.
Journalist Luis Nahara investigated the cartels in Mexico and fled to Canada. He sees their growing influence here, with criminal groups exploiting Pacific and Atlantic ports and laundering millions.
It has been significantly increasing, of course, because of the advantages that Canada offers.
But experts wonder what help will come now, with a trail of murders left behind, including the cartel-linked shooting of an innocent Indian couple in Ontario, still unresolved. The benefit of designating the cartels is primarily a political one in terms of appeasing Trump and signaling to our American allies that we are willing to play ball.
The public safety minister insists the move will help authorities track the cartel's money and disrupt their operations once they're listed as terrorist groups alongside ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Thomas Dagg, CBC News, Toronto.
After the break, more on Donald Trump's threats on the Canadian economy and how they're motivating provincial leaders to band together.
So I know when I really like a song, if within the first 3 seconds, I'm already vibing to it.
Hey, I'm Rohith Joseph. Vibin' is the new show all about discovering great new songs and fresh artists from across BC and beyond.
It's not one person dictating what good music is, it's the community sharing what good music is.
Stream Vibin' on CBC Listen.
A potential trade war with the U.S. has many looking to Canada to become more self-reliant. One of the biggest hurdles remains, though, interprovincial trade barriers. Now there appears to be a newfound urgency and motivation to tear down those walls. Transport and Internal Trade Minister Anita Anand says she's seeing a willingness from federal and provincial officials.
The willingness to reduce interprovincial barriers to trade and add up to $200 billion to the Canadian economy is palpable, and the provinces and territories are at the table with enthusiasm in a way that has not occurred over the past number of decades. And every minister at the table felt the need, as do I, as does our government, to act collectively, to seize the moment, and to do whatever we can to reduce those barriers to trade.
Prime Minister Trudeau met with premiers virtually for the first time since Monday's tariff reprieve. Officials on the federal and provincial level are working to try to prevent the U.S. president from starting a trade war for good. But as Olivia Stefanovich explains, the official opposition is also pitching ideas.
Merci beaucoup.
With the U.S. president keeping up the pressure, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is unveiling his own plan to tackle one of Donald Trump's biggest irritants.
We should crack down on drugs, not to please President Trump, but to ensure that not one more mother has to bury her face in her hands on learning that her son died of an overdose.
Poilievre is pitching mandatory life sentences for anyone convicted of selling 40 milligrams of fentanyl, enough to kill 20 people, and a 15-year sentence for traffickers found to be selling smaller quantities.
We will lock them up and we will throw away the key.
Everyone smiles. Poilievre isn't the only one making bold new promises as Trump's tariff threat lingers.
My government would work to reach 2% of GDP in defense spending by the end of this decade.
Liberal leadership candidate Mark Carney pledging to meet Canada's NATO defense spending commitment by 2030, 2 years earlier than the current plan, heavily criticized by Trump.
I will do whatever it takes to strengthen our economy and to protect Canadians.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister held a 90-minute call with premiers, the first since Trump agreed to pause tariffs.
As long as Donald Trump is president, the risk of tariffs will never go away. This is a game to him. He wants to break Canada.
2, 1.
One of the ways the federal and provincial governments are trying to make the country more resilient is by encouraging internal trade, which could boost the economy by $200 billion.
There's a real opportunity right now to build up the amount of dollars that we're spending in Canada by bringing down some of those barriers.
The Prime Minister will meet with business, public policy and labor leaders tomorrow for a new economic summit. The goal to protect Canada's economy from the whims of the U.S., its largest and increasingly erratic trading partner. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
Stephanie Hungerford is here with our BC-wide weather forecast, and you spotted something looking out the window.
I did, Dan, and I see flurries. So this is in downtown Vancouver right now as we speak. Not too many, but I think we can expect more of that as we go forward. I'll get back to that in just a moment. I'm just going to focus on the rest of British Columbia right now. We have a couple of warnings. We have an Arctic outflow warning on the central coast in Terrace and Bella Coola, rather. And these are basically the winds I've been talking about the last couple of days. up to 50 kilometers per hour, which is going to cause the wind chill to go up in much of that region, as well as in Whistler. Wind chill temperatures there at about minus 22. We also have extreme cold in the Chilcotin region. That's really where it's going to be the most cold in British Columbia. We're talking minus 35 to minus 40. So very cold. Now, back to us, Dan, where we see the snow falling outside our window. This is where we're going to see the snow. We're going to see it in Metro Vancouver. We're going to see this in Richmond, Delta, Maple Ridge, Coquitlam, all the way into Abbotsford and Mission. 2 to 5 centimeters of snow tonight and into tomorrow morning. This is also going to be in Victoria and Nanaimo. And then we're going to see some sun starting tomorrow afternoon and into Friday, but maybe some snow also for Saturday. And as we can see tonight, look at across the board, very, very cold. And this is not including the wind chills. So, you know, this is what we're facing all throughout British Columbia, this Arctic air that we're feeling. Tomorrow morning, very beautiful, as we can see, very sunny, but cold. Again, the wind chills we have to keep in mind when we go out. Make sure to bundle up. Friday, much of the same, a little bit warmer in Whistler, tiny bit warmer in the Kootenays and Kelowna, Kamloops region. Saturdays, pretty cold as well. And then for the 5-day forecast for Metro Vancouver, we have, again, very, very cold throughout the evening. In fact, this morning at 5 a.m., we almost broke a record. It was minus 8.8. So pretty cold. Again, that Saturday, we might see some snow there as well. Sunday, sun, and then still very, very cold next week. So we're not really seeing anything letting up. And, you know, we've had this variable weather pattern where we don't know how much snow we're getting. So could be 2 centimeters, could be 4, Dan.
Okay, the mystery awaits. Stephanie, thanks very much. New research out of SFU shows incarcerated youth in BC are less likely to reoffend after they're released from jail or prison. This was a long-term study looking at youth offenders from the age of 12 and followed them after they were released for several years. SFU School of Criminology Assistant Professor Evan McQuish is here to tell us more about the findings. He's one of 4 co-authors of the Incarcerated Serious and Violent Young Offenders Study. Evan, thanks for joining us. First of all, most studies like this have looked primarily at the U.S. prison populations. Why is it important to make that distinction between how our two systems deal with youth offenders?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. So in the United States, they use custody quite liberally, meaning that a lot of people will end up in custody, including people involved in relatively non-serious offenses. In Canada, especially since the Youth Criminal Justice Act in 2003, there's a pretty high bar to clear to enter custody as a youth. So youth in custody in Canada tend to be involved in much more serious and violent offenses compared to down in the United States.
What was the most important thing you discovered out of this long-range study?
Yeah, so these kids were actually followed for about 2 decades into adulthood. And what we found was that both in adolescence and in adulthood, increases in the amount of time they spent in custody from 1 year to the next were associated with decreases in their typical levels of offending from 1 year to the next.
Any particular reason why that is?
Yeah, and that's a great question about why is Canada's system finding different observations compared to the United States, where down there tends to be either no effect of incarceration or in fact a criminogenic effect where incarceration increases offending. So we have 3 potential explanations. One is that when kids are incarcerated, they get exposed to positive sources of rehabilitation, whether it's schooling, vocational training, just an opportunity to connect with positive mentors. Could also be deterrent factors, such as not wanting to return to receive an even lengthier custody sentence. But when they're released from custody, they can often be subject to greater supervision, monitoring, and additional access to services, and those could contribute to lower levels of offending as well.
Now there may be some who will worry that the findings of the study would lead to stronger political will to increase prison sentencing for youth. Is that a concern?
It is. So we've been working on this for about at least over 4 years now. And we were concerned that this would be used as an example of why we should increase the use of custody for kids in Canada. But what we're seeing, at least in BC, is that after we saw basically a concerted attempt to reduce the use of custody to only those kids involved in serious and violent offenses, we're also coming from some of the most unimaginably difficult circumstances. When we do that, when we avoid incarcerating kids who should not be incarcerated, that's when maybe we see the effect of incarceration actually paying off.
All right. And any other follow-up studies on this that you expect? I mean, this was a 20-year look, as you said.
Yeah, so what we're working on now is trying to exactly understand, were there specific programs in custody that were beneficial? Were there changes to the person's social environment, whether it's positive connections with family, improved employment or housing outcomes? How did these contribute, if at all, to reductions in recidivism rates?
All right. Evan McQuish, a co-author of the Incarcerated, Serious and Violent Young Offenders Study out of SFU. We appreciate your time and your expertise. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
The Kansas City Chiefs are set to kick off against the Philadelphia Eagles in Super Bowl 59 this weekend. But before the players, puppies will hit the gridiron. More on the pigskin pooches after the break.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and this is your CBC Inbox. Canada's biggest night in music is coming to Vancouver, and we want you to be there. The Juno Awards will be hosted by BC's own Michael Bublé, live from Rogers Arena on Sunday, March 30th. The evening features live performances by Juno-nominated artists, including a special award presentation to rock band Sum 41. Tickets on sale now at cbcmusic.ca/Junos.
This is Vancouver is a new CBC podcast where we explore the issues, the stories, and the people that make this place home. Listen to This is Vancouver wherever you get your podcasts.
Get set for the fur to fly at Puppy Bowl 21, returning this Sunday, airing just ahead of the Super Bowl.
There they are. Over 100 rescue pooches from shelters across the U.S. are set to compete in the annual Super Bowl for dogs. Team Fluff and Team Rough will battle it out on the gridiron to take home the Lombardi Trophy. This year's competition also showcases special needs dogs for the first time.
The most valuable pup and underdog prizes will also be awarded. Organizers say the Puppy Bowl's main mission is to encourage pet adoptions so animals can find forever homes.
It's a good cause. That's cute.
Oh, they're so cute.
You gonna watch the game?
Yeah, I'm gonna watch the game. Yeah,
Rooting for?
Well, we've got, two sides in our house,
Oh,
so
dear.
I'm gonna have to figure out, whisper one to one.
And distribute the chips and the dip,
Yeah.
evenly. Absolutely. Should be fun.
Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
And we'll be back with your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. Good night.